Hello, this is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My main thing is helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching the Bring Your Worth show. Let me make sure that everybody's on from Amazon as well. Shout out to y'all on Amazon. Give it 1 second. It should be going. There we go. We are live. Hey, welcome to the show. I come to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Excuse me. And you see why I haven't been catching you on Wednesdays for the live shows. I do a live show every Wednesday, and then every Monday and Friday I do a recorded show. We're talking about business. We're talking about side hustles. We're talking about emotional intelligence. Shout out to Brene Brown. We're talking about ways that you can make an impact on the world based on what you have and allow you to build from now, remix your career, and many other things I've talked about in the past. Excuse me. We are actually at about 215 episodes. So thank you for riding with me. It's been a lot of fun. Again, you can catch the show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I've been dealing with some sinuses and allergies and stuff for most of this winter. Thank God it's springtime now. It's springtime here in the States as of a couple of days ago. Ooh, it's about time because winter was long for me. So a lot of like pollen and all that stuff. A family member sent me an article that said that because of climate change, that allergies are getting worse. I am like proof of concept. So I got my tea here. I'm happy to connect with y'all. And if you are enjoying the programming or if you want to connect with me regularly, you can subscribe for free at youtube.com/BrownDamon. Click the link below or let's go to youtube.com/BrownDamon. You'll see a subscribe button here. If you're watching a replay of this, then you can go and hit the subscribe button. Should be like here. Everything is backwards in YouTube land, so forgive me. Shout out to y'all on LinkedIn as well. Thank you for all your support, especially for all the new followers and people that have been checking me out because of the events that are happening. So I will get into that in a second. I am celebrating Career Remix. The audiobook is out as of yesterday. So my shows are every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It came out on Tuesday, so we're having a launch party today. Career Remix, get the gig you want based on the skills you got. If you're watching on Amazon Live, you should see the link down there well, all versions are out now. So, which is, excuse me, weird and humbling and exciting, where it's like so much work went into it. Shout out to Union Square and Company, as well as Chet Audio, who actually handled the audiobook. I actually have a video where I talk about the behind the scenes of the audiobook. If you go to youtube.com/BrownDamon, you see the video on there. I might, if I get a chance during our half an hour show, I might throw that in there as well. The audiobook, though, is available everywhere. I am geeked, worked really hard on it. It's my first professionally done audiobook where I actually did it in a studio. The vibe is different, y'all. Some of y'all made my previous books bestsellers and stuff. So I know some of y'all know my work. It's even stronger than that. So I think you'll be really happy with it. Thank you for the love and support. Speaking of love and support, tea break. As I talked about a few episodes ago, audiobooks are tough because you have to say everything out loud. So this is a 65,000 word book, and it comes down to about 7 hours of audio. But you got to make sure that it's tight and it's done well. I worked at MGB Music Studios. Shout out to Michael, downtown Vegas, and I'm based in Las Vegas. And ended up being a really good experience, but very different, very intense. And yeah, make sure every word is right, every word is clear, which is a different vibe from when you're actually, you have your own imprint and you're doing stuff on your own, to working again with Union Square and Company as well as Chet Audio. So thanks for support over there. And thank you for supporting the book. I know many of y'all bought the book. Be sure and do a review so other people like you can find out about it. Speaking of coming through, Bring Your Worth live at the Mendel Center. Excuse me, Mendel Center is at Lake Michigan College. It's Benton Harbor, St. Joe. I actually had my teenage years in Michigan on the other side of the state, but I'm familiar with the area. I'm happy to be coming back. A tiny kind of homecoming. I don't know Benton Harbor, St. Joe as well, so shout out to y'all. But I do know mid and southern Michigan fairly well. So a lot of history there. Shout out to Oakland University, MSU, and all the places out there that I've hung out at, or that I've gotten degrees from. So go figure. We'll be doing it live in person. I'll be doing my Bring Your Worth keynote revamped. So if you actually saw the Bring Your Worth keynote a few years ago, the work I did in Toledo, or work I did down in Austin or all those different places. Some of those videos are actually available on the YouTube channel for free at youtube.com/BrownDamon. Totally different vibe. I mean, I was doing that stuff pre-pandemic. I was doing it before Career Remix, which we'll be celebrating the launch of. A lot of stuff has changed. You've changed. I'm sure you're not the same person that you were 3 years ago. I would be shocked, especially since a lot of us have that growth mindset. So we were growing anyway, and the pandemic made us grow either faster, sometimes even slower, which isn't a bad thing, or in directions that we weren't planning on going in. I think it's important to acknowledge that. Anyway, I'll be doing one-on-one coaching for some of the folks that are coming through, if you're lucky enough to get some of that, and then we'll be able to connect afterwards for the coaching, which will be virtual. They're actually giving away books. So last I saw, they're giving away like 100 books to the first 100 people or so, 100 or 150, I believe, people that sign up for it. And we're talking Bring Your Worth. We're talking Built From Now. We're talking about my previous bestsellers. It's an opportunity. And I'm not traveling as much as I used to. Before, you can catch me like on both coasts and hanging out and all that stuff. You can ask my family. Now, I don't get out that much at all. I'm going to TED in a few weeks. Shout out to TED. So I'm going up to Vancouver for that. Staying home for a week and then coming out to Benton Harbor, St. Joe. So hope to see y'all there. Click the link. You can check it out. You can buy the tickets online too and see what's up. Today, we're going to talk about great career audiobooks you should get. I love audiobooks. I didn't always love audiobooks. As I've talked about in previous episodes, I didn't get into audiobooks, excuse me, until I became the primary caregiver of my wife and I's first son. And he's going to be 9 this summer. So it was a while ago. And if you've had a baby in your hands and it's a healthy baby, it'll be very active. And my baby was very active. And so I couldn't sit there and shout to Brian Terry and his wonderful book, Black Food. You can see my essay in there. But I couldn't just grab a book and be like this, and my kid is pooping and peeing and running all over the place, trying to grab scissors and stuff. So I got into I got into audiobooks and it being this wonderful experience. And I never went back. So, physical books, come on, you can see this is a fraction of the books that I own. But audiobooks became part of how I enjoyed things, particularly when I got into walking. I was running for a period of time, traveling, being on a plane, and being able to just be immersed. And then when I started making audiobooks later, which was after the fact, then I had a whole new appreciation because my first major bestseller, I had a bestseller beforehand. My first major one on my imprint was the Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, which is up here somewhere. Y'all might be more familiar with the deluxe edition with the purple thing. But the regular edition, y'all made it a bestseller, which I appreciate. That was 2016. And that was my first audiobook experience, actually recording one. And it gave me a sense of appreciation for the work that goes into it. And now I've done a professional audiobook downtown with an engineer and all that stuff and the headphones. And, I'm like Eddie Murphy and Rick James in the booth. If you're of my age, you probably know what reference I'm talking about, and just enjoying the whole experience, but also coming to work. So the books I'm recommending aren't just good content. The books themselves are fantastic. Just if you read them, fine. But the audiobooks themselves are great. And I'm happy to kind of give my recommendations from both perspectives, not only as an author, but also as a narrator. All right, so the first one I'd recommend would be Upstream by Dan Heath. If you watch the show at all, I really enjoyed this book. Dan Heath, and he's really popular. His book's really popular with his brother, Chip. So Chip Heath, they did a lot of classic books from a decade ago. To be honest, I missed all of them, but I caught this one. So it's just him alone without his brother. And it is a fantastic book. I read it probably about a year and a half ago. When I was working on Career Remix, there's a few quotes from Dan Heath in there from the book. But it talks about systems. And the analogy is that there's a great analogy where Upstream comes from, but I'm going to paraphrase the analogy of the analogy. And so if there's issues coming downstream, then all you're trying to do is fix the problem, right? So you're just trying to fix the problem. But if you go upstream, you can figure out what the systemic issue is. So I think the subtitle, if I remember correctly, is The Quest to Solve Problems Before They Even Happen, right? Fantastic. And he gives like a ton of examples of that. I quoted in, again, Career Remix a few times. I actually mentioned it in a few previous episodes of the Bring Your Words show too, which I'll reference in a minute. But it's a fantastic book. Audiobook is great too. And it was really good to listen to. I want to say it's about the same length as Career Remix, maybe about 7 to 8 hours. And it's absolutely worth your time. Particularly like your system could be like me, where you're an entrepreneur and you're creating stuff. I have a private coaching practice, as I mentioned before, or as I hinted at before. And so that could be your system. Your system could be, I have a 5 and an 8-year-old. So it's like, so the system could be your family systems and how you handle that. But if you deal with systems, you got to listen to this one. I can't recommend it higher. Excuse me. I actually did a video related to it, A Better Way to Reach Your Goals, where I talk about one of the biggest principles that's in Upstream. Highly recommend you check out the video. Excuse me. All the videos on Bring Your Worth on the channel and TV show. I have a couple there like 20 minutes, but most of them are like between 8 and 15 minutes. They're not that long. And so hopefully I can distill a lot of this, it's like a 300, 400 page book. So if you do not get a chance to check out the audiobook, or if you want kind of like a taste of the audiobook, be sure and check out this video. It'll give you an idea of one of the principles that's talked about. And Dan did an excellent job of breaking it down. Another one I recommend, audiobook, would be The Dip. It's hella short. I think it's hella cheap too. Let me check. Yeah, I have the guide right here. It's $10. It's a $10 audiobook. Audiobooks are going for 30, 40, 50 bucks nowadays. Mine is about $25. So that's kind of the going rate. This one's like $10. That's because the book is like this tiny. I think the audiobook itself is about an hour and a half. It's done by Seth himself. If you're familiar with Akimbo, which is not only the workshops that he founded, which I was a part of several years ago. I guess it was just 3 years ago. This pandemic is messing with my brain. Luckily not in a bad way. Just as far as time. And then Kimbo.com, the podcast, which I love. I just listened to it this morning. It comes out every Wednesday morning. And he talks about when you should quit and when you should stay. And that's what the dip is. And if you're going to make good moves in your career, you have to know when to leave. I was just talking to someone. Yeah, I talked to a couple of people over the past week for some articles I was working on, some research I was doing. And we're talking about quitting. And for some of them, they looked at quitting their startup or their business, whatever, as a quote unquote bad thing. And sometimes it's time to go so you can make room for other things. And that's okay. Seth does an excellent job as far as breaking down the criteria if you're confused about that. A lot of the coaching work that I do is about people wanting to leave their jobs. I mean, Career Remix, this comes out of the Great Resignation. And so many people, the people that I coach regularly through my private coaching or through the coaching I do within organizations, they're like, when the hell do I know I'm supposed to leave? Am I the problem? Do I need to change? Is the organization a problem? Do they need to change? Are we the problem? Like oil and milk, oil and water. I was thinking about a hip hop reference. You get extra points if you know what hip hop reference I was thinking about with milk. But my whole point is like, are we just bad chemistry together? And is it not going to work out? It's just a bad environment, like a bad relationship. You got to have some type of criteria to know that. Frankly, in most cases, we're part of the problem and we're not the entire problem. But before you quit your job, the dip talks about that. I think I quote the dip a couple times in this as well. Forgive me, I wrote the book like a year ago, so I can't remember. I think the dip is in there as well. Definitely some gems from Seth Godin in there. I've connected with him once, and I consider him a mentor from afar. So thank you, Seth, for all your great work. Check out Akimbo for sure. And then check out my video episode from probably about a year ago. Can't believe I can say that. Show's been around for a year and a half, where I talk about when should I quit something. It's super short. I think this video is like 6 minutes long. If you're in that situation, just check out the video. I've quit a lot of things. And one of the biggest compliments I've gotten over the years is how I follow through with things. Like, again, this is the 210th or so episode of the Bring Your Worst show. I've been under the weather because of allergies and sinus stuff for most of the winter. So I haven't been doing the Wednesday live shows, which I mentioned in my newsletter over at joindamon.me, but the Monday and Friday shows, it's been consistent for a year and a half. I started December before last. So that's been one of the compliments I've gotten over the years, which I've taken to heart. I take consistency, if I can say it, consistency seriously. But I also knew that with my sinuses, with make sure my kids are straight, all the things that are going on in my life, that the Wednesday shows, the live shows, were too much. So I took a break. There are other things I was doing that I just flat out quit. But then that gave me room to show up for you. That gave me room to, go to TED in a few weeks up in Vancouver. That gave me room to have the keynote over at the Mendel Center. Well, I look forward to seeing y'all there up in Southwest Michigan at Lake Michigan College. That gave room for that. That gave me room to write a career remix, which there's no way in hell I would have written a book if I was overburdened with the stuff that really didn't have a space in my life. This video gets into all that. It's like 5-6 minutes long. My summary actually was probably longer than the video, but it goes back to the dip. Again, Seth's work is awesome if you're familiar with it. Again, I consider him a North Star when it comes to this stuff. The dip is a good place to start if you're not sure if it's time to quit. And the audiobook is excellent. You can listen to it in an hour. All right, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Another vibe. This comes from the creative side. Elizabeth Gilbert is a writer. You're probably familiar with her work, particularly Eat, Pray, Love, which ended up being a gift and a curse, because then it really took her away from the type of writing that she liked doing, because it sold, 15 million copies, and people either loved or hated her, and it was hard for her to do her work. This is almost like an exercise, or more like an exorcism of I think some of the demons that came out of that. Which, if you're any type of creative, if you're a creative accounting, hopefully in a good way, accountants are creative, but hopefully not too creative. If you are a traditional creative, like you're an artist, like the beautiful, Jimmy Baldwin, or should I say James Baldwin? I feel weird calling him Jimmy. James Baldwin in the back. You're that kind of artist. If you're a creator like myself, where you do startups and you create content and you write books, whatever type of creative you are, and as Chase Jarvis says, we're kind of creatives. This is a book about finding that creative magic when you feel like you lost it. And sometimes when it comes to career issues, it's about finding that spark again and figuring out where things should go. And that's difficult to do sometimes. And she talks about that. And I love that she talks about it in such a vulnerable, beautiful way. I can't say more about it. If I can start talking about it more, it'll be another hour of the show. But fantastic book. The audiobook is excellent, by the way. She narrates it herself. I've been to like 2 of her TED Talks. If you've watched her TED Talks, which are very popular, go to TED.com, check out Elizabeth Gilbert. I'm trying to remember. I think I mentioned, I think I have links to her TED Talk, excuse me, on the channel. Now I'm trying to remember. But if you go to youtube.com/BrownDame, I think I mentioned her TED Talks in some of the playlists. Speaking of playlists, a good pairing to this would be my playlist for the Bring Your Worst show, Smart Creative Routines and Habits. She talks a lot about showing up, which is another thing, going back to Seth Godin, and making creativity a habit, whether that's writing, whether that's going to work every day. Me showing up for y'all for this show, again, for 80 weeks now. I started the week of Christmas of 2020. So whatever that is, but showing up for y'all every single week, oftentimes 3 times a week. That's the habit. Whether I'm feeling under the weather, whether I feel great, whether, I have a book that I'm hype about that's just coming out, or there isn't much going on in the world, and I'm just shooting the stuff with y'all. Still here. And so showing up and making the routine helps create the magic happen. I have a playlist of probably about 12, maybe 13 now, videos. Again, each one's like 10 minutes long or something. Knock yourself out. Have fun. If you feel like you're in a rut, you can't find that magic, think about your routines and your habits. This is a good place to start with this playlist. Excuse me. Recommend The Art of War by Sun Tzu. This is not a new book, but it stays on the bestsellers list. I forget what century Sun Tzu was around, but it is fantastic, classic, extremely short book. This version of it, though, the audiobook, is by Aidan Gillen. Forgive me, for my Scottish and or Irish listeners, because I'm butchering his name, because he's actually from you can hear the accent. And he played one of the major characters in Game of Thrones. He also was Carcetti, which I know him from in The Wire, the guy that was running for mayor of DC. Excellent actor. He's never had an accent in many of his roles. And then he's saying this, he's doing the performing, I should say, the audiobook, and it is fantastic. And I got I don't think I have any copies up here. I got 3 copies of Art of War. I have the 48 Laws of Power and other books that were inspired by that. My collection I have the 5 Rings, which is connected to the art. I got all those joints. And for me to discover this, I discovered it 3-4 years ago, and it blew my mind. I was because I already know it by heart. The book is super short. Art of War, I think the audiobook's probably 45 minutes long, but the book itself is tiny. Woo! He kills it. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So if you're not familiar with Art of War, there's a reason why it's classic strategy discussions when it comes to running your business, which, as I say in Career Remix, the job is your employer's. If you leave your job or you're fired or it's merger, whatever, they can replace you. The career is yours to keep. You're going to take that joint with you when you leave your job. You need a strategy when it comes to your career. I mean, that's what, again, the new book Career Remix is about. You need a strategy. That you got to own that. So it's easier for me because I literally own my own business. So it's Damon Brown Incorporated. It's my joint. This is my show. I'm the executive producer. I'm the editor. I'm the talent, right? So it's easy to say, oh, okay, I'm in charge of this. But if you have a day job, you're still in charge of it. It's just way more obvious when looking at me that I'm in charge of this joint. But you're in charge as well. See, I'm putting my coaching hat in. I'm going to relax. Art of War. You need it on your shelf. Get the audiobook, though, because it is fantastic. If you already got it on your shelf and you already know it as well as I do, get this joint anyway. Shout out to Aiden. And yeah, I was already a fan back from The Wire 20 years ago. This made me even bigger fan. Related to that, Steve Harvey's Money Advice, Why Titles Don't Matter. You're what does Steve Harvey have to do with this? He had a great conversation on Earn Your Leisure, which is a podcast run by two young guys. Shout out to them. Y'all are fantastic. I've loved your work for years now at this point. I think you guys have been doing it for 5-6 years. So you correct me in the comments if you happen to be listening. But they interviewed Steve Harvey, he's most known for this generation, Family Feud. My generation would be the Kings of Comedy and his hosting on the different comedy specials and just being an all-out comedian. But he's similar to Shaq. He's similar to Nas, if you're from the hip-hop world, Jay-Z, even from the hip-hop world, where they had one particular type of entertainer run. But while they had their run, they started diversifying and doing all this stuff. And now he's executive producing this, and he has this compound down south. I think it's in Atlanta where, he's I think he's starting to film movies there and all this stuff. And there's a certain strategic element. But as I talk about in the video, which is worth watching, he was actually broke and homeless for a period of time. And that was after he got some success. And then he got some success, which again, my generation will be the Kings of Comedy, legendary movie that came out about 20 years ago, which got a lot of our attention, even though we were familiar with him. But then he talks about in this interview that he lost all that money and almost ended up, being in trouble again for another reason. And now he's about to back up. the strategy that he talks about, particularly what I talk about, it's only a 10-minute video that I have on there. The strategy that he talks about in this interview that I highlight in this show, this episode, fantastic. It ties really well with the art of war. And because, like life moves fast. I'll put it like that. 2 years ago, if you said, Damon, you're going to have a YouTube show and you're going to be 200 episodes in by March of 2022. And at least here in America, March of 2020 represented some things. It represents from a lot of things for a lot of people in the Western world. So things move so fast, you need to have a strategy beyond right now. Again, I got my coaching hat on. Let me relax. Speaking of coaching, though, my last recommendation, highly, highly recommend, might be my favorite book of the list, would be The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. This came out about 25 years ago. He's done a few books recently, but he just talked about this one book that he did, rightfully so, for like a decade and a half. I don't think he did anything else but talked about this book, as he should have. It is a fantastic book. It talks about why, in my opinion, my interpretation, why we sabotage ourselves. When we see an opportunity where the classic example, which I mentioned in Career Remix, and I think I also mentioned it briefly in my previous independent book, Built From Now. Thanks to all you that supported in 2020 or in 2021, where you have lottery winners who might have been, in some cases, literally praying to win the lottery. They win the lottery, and then you might know the stats, like 99% of them end up being broke or in worse financial trouble within a year. Part of it might be preparation, which I talk about in Career Remix, as well as in Build From Now, the previous book. But part of it too, which is what I will say, Gay Talese, who's one of my favorite writers, Gay Hendricks, what Gay Hendricks says is that it's also an upper limit problem, where even though you might be going through challenges, and I'll just talk about career, it's not even get into personal, you might be having challenges career-wise, but you know who your boss is. You know the coworkers, even the ones that you don't like. You know how to deal with them. You know who they are. You know how to avoid them. You might hate your commute if you're commuting again, as we get further into the pandemic. If you're back to commuting, you might hate your commute, but you're comfortable with it. And so if you're not accepting that there is actually some benefits, some comfort level that you haven't faced as far as the situation that you're in, particularly career-wise, then Hendricks believes that you'll actually start to sabotage those opportunities so you can get back into your comfort zone. He gets much deeper into it. The audiobook is fantastic. It was one of the first major audiobooks that I got around that same era that my kid was born, and my first kid was born. And it is a fantastic book. It holds up well. I listen to it about every other year. So another one that I would recommend as far as a pairing to this will be Brene Brown Top 5, Why You Should Ignore Critics. I've been wanting to do a video about this concept that I heard her talk about on stage literally for years. It wasn't going to be a video. It was going to be something else, but I knew I had to write about it in some form. Obviously, I didn't have a YouTube show when I saw her at TED. Oh my gosh, I think she talked about this at TED like 8 years ago. And it was just like, I was like, I got to remember this joint. And finally, I did a show about it. I think it premiered about 2 weeks ago. Hope you enjoy it. But it's a really simple method to keep the critics out of your ear. And that's part of the issue that we have with Hendricks' upper limit problem. It's not always the internal limits, but also the limits that other people are saying, and we're embracing them and internalizing them. So Brene Brown gets into that. Also have a playlist related to Brene Brown. You go over to the YouTube channel and check out all that. All right, so that's it for the show. Excuse me. I'll get one more cough out. Thank you for all the love and support. Bring More show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe now for free. I can just come straight to your tube. 200 plus episodes. Come enjoy it. The audiobook Career Remix is out now. I am geeked. It was a lot of hard work. I did this back to back with Build From Now, my previous book, so I worked hard on it. Hope it shows, particularly in the audiobook, my first professional one. And I hope you guys enjoy it. And come through to Bring Your Worth Live over at the Mendel Center, April 26th, Southwest Michigan. Hope to see y'all there. Until next time, remember, you can always bring your worth, and you can always build from now. Take care.